So, hello and welcome to this episode of Digital Marketing Stories. My name's Jim Banks. I'm your host, and I'm absolutely delighted to have on the show today Allen Kaplun, who was just telling me in the green room he's just come back from Vegas, so he's probably a bit jaded. But Allen, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
So,
Appreciate it.
so Allen, I always kind of try and start the show with a little bit of a background in terms of like who you are and where you're all about. So you're in Texas, is that right?
Yes. So I ended up in Texas. Originally, I was in New York. I'm a native New Yorker. Had a law practice, and I had a side hustle on Amazon. That thing took off, and now I had to figure out. Okay, well, what do I do now? My side hustle is now a full-fledged business. It's generating a lot of cash flow, and it's just growing in leaps and bounds. So I had to make a really hard decision. I had to figure out what do I do with my law practice, uh, and I ended up. It took me a little bit over a year to wind it down and commit myself fully to e-commerce.
Yeah, because most people would assume that you'd make more money as a lawyer than you would do as a e-commerce person. But like, I'm amazed. I've got a lot of friends that started off in law and ended up kind of doing like digital marketing in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, the money was pretty good. I mean, but it was 60 to 80 hours a week. It was just a daily grind and just very monotonous. I would hop on a bus, go into the city, go to court, come back, rinse, repeat. And the e-commerce business was just, I mean, it was just night and day, just growing exponentially. And that's one of the things that people tend to have a hard time grappling with. What happens when you have exponential growth? It's just so hard to identify. If you have a business growing 50% per week, I mean that's really hard to compute, right? So I managed to eventually identify it, and I said to myself, okay, well, I started from my apartment, and then it grew into I had a second law office in New Jersey, so I had to store some inventory over there and some unused space, and it just kept growing. It kept growing in leaps and bounds and very rapidly. So it was just a decision I had to make, and law is great and everything, but well, maybe not that great. But the e-commerce business was so much more exciting, absolutely more exciting.
Yeah, I know. Like everyone I know that's involved in e-commerce in one way, shape, or form, just loves the vibe of the industry. It's a kind of great industry to be in because it is so diverse. There's so many different strings to it. It's not everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's doing something completely different. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about GDS. So GDS is your current company. And again, I can go to the website. All the information will be in the show notes. But tell us a little bit about GDS and kind of like the reason that you set it up and who you work with.
Yeah. So GDS was the next stage after e-commerce. So I started out as an Amazon seller. Then I grew the business into having multiple warehouses, started wholesaling, doing B2B. And GDS arose from just my desire to bring over brands from abroad into the US and build out their distribution. So I felt I had the infrastructure for it. I had the operations in place. I had some of the marketing in place. So what GDS does is they take on brands that have some kind of a presence internationally and want to establish themselves in the US, want to build out distribution there. And that's what we do. We take on these brands, we sign them up on an exclusive distributorship, get them FDA ready. There's a compliance process in there, which they really don't like. And from the other side, they're actually, there's a lot of fear about complying with the FDA, but we get them FDA ready. Uh, and make sure everything is from the logistics standpoint, make sure everything is intact there, and then we start marketing their products. We start with e-commerce campaigns, influencer campaigns. Uh, Yesterday, I just flew back from a trade show, and that's actually to get these brands into brick and mortar stores. So It's it's pretty exciting because you bring over a brand that has a presence, let's say, in a small country in Europe. For them to get any kind of distribution in the U.S. is just life changing for them.
Yeah, I think
It's
so many
absolutely life
businesses
changing.
are not aware logistically of what's involved in sort of going from one country to another, and I mean it happens in reverse. So we you know we see a lot of American companies that think they can just kind of come over and do the same thing in the UK and in Europe, and obviously the legislation, red tape, the European Union, all this sort of stuff is it's you know the barriers are really challenging, and I think sometimes, as you say, like if you can find somebody like yourself who can kind of handle all aspects of it, so it's just the logistics, the regulation, compliance, but also then the kind of the marketing and promotion of the products, is invaluable to people that kind of want to do that.
Yeah, yeah. The marketing is definitely essential because you need to drive consumer demand, and that's something they're not used to. They're used to just opening up in the supermarket in a country, let's say like in Spain or something, and that's it. They've planted their flag, they have distribution, and there's not much else to do. The U.S. is a different animal, so we have to think in terms of regional distribution. We have to think in terms of uh, getting consumers to actually want the product, right? Stirring up that kind of engagement, driving that kind of demand. So
Does it tend
that's something they always have
like
to take into account.
nostalgia products? Is it mostly nostalgia products? People that like maybe have come across to Europe and they've enjoyed a particular product that they go, oh, I really wish I could kind of get that in the States, and they struggle to. I mean,
It's more like, well, I'll tell you what it is. So for this trade show, I was representing a line of coffee syrups, and it's actually a beverage company that has cocktail mixers, ready to drink cocktails, anything associated with the bar industry or the coffee industry. So the key differentiator is it's just a very high quality product, great flavor profile. But that's also a challenge because nowadays everyone's looking for functional. Everyone's looking for something that has that magic keyword to just drive those sales. And this is not one of those products, but we're able to work around it. We're able to get the correct marketing in place to actually build up that kind of momentum. So unlike other products which are functional, it doesn't have some sort of a chia seed in it. It doesn't have those buzzwords. I mean, it is gluten free, it is vegan, but that's very. I would even argue that's very tertiary compared to what the quality of that product is. So
it's funny. I'm
yeah,
always
so
amazed at how much coffee like people in America drink, but like more so now, like across the world. I mean, I think for some reason coffee's become a major sort of selling proposition. And again, I mean, like we have a brand over here that's been around since I think 1960 something called Costa Coffee. But they're probably on a par with Starbucks here in the UK, and like neither of them have got a kind of can hold a candle to a lot of the Italian coffees that you can kind of get in if you go to Italy or something like that, all these like beautiful Italian coffees that taste delicious, and just again, I know a lot of people kind of want to enjoy that sort of Italian barista experience, but not having to kind of go to Italy to be able to get it at home.
yeah, exactly. And arguably, in many of the chain stores, you taste the coffee here in the U.S. and it can be pretty mediocre at times. But with this brand, I'm trying to change all of that. So it does have distribution in Italy, and that's kind of a big deal for Italy to accept that brand. That's major.
Yeah.
All right, that's a big nod to it.
So most of the guests that I've had on at some point in time, their lives were touched in some way during the pandemic, in terms of things going a little bit wonky as a result of just things that were happening that outside their control. How was the pandemic for your line of business? 'Cause I would imagine it would have probably been kind of tough.
So it kind of it probably aged me about 10 years during that time span. But yeah, it was absolutely sleepless for me. forget about stay at home. For me, I was pretty much living in airports, absolutely living in airports, just flying around from one warehouse to another, and or for whatever business purpose, just trying to keep up with demand and sales. It was just it wasn't one of those things. I mean, I envied the people that were staying at home. I longed to go back to my house. It was like I was living a corrupted wish, honestly, because you're getting just a flood of sales coming in, all this money just gushing in, and
So you that's the
I'm
opposite of what most people experience. Most people experience a shutdown and a dramatic drop in kind of their normal kind of day to day. But I'm guessing things like home delivery, curbside delivery, all that sort of stuff really took
yeah,
off. I mean, I was working with some brands that were doing e-commerce, and all of them were net winners, right? They were all selling products that benefited from having the ability to be able to buy it without having to go into a shop to get it, right? They could kind of get it and just have it delivered to them, left on the doorstep, whether it was through an Amazon delivery or somewhere else, but they could kind of do a door drop or curbside pickup
oh
or
yeah,
whatever it might be. They were able to kind of do that, and it really dramatically improved the volume of sales that they were able to do, throughout that entire pandemic period, because people were sitting at home bored out of their minds, going, I need to kind of do something. So they were just sitting there all day, kind of credit card buying stuff that they really didn't need, but
yeah. I mean, it advanced the number of brands. It gave exposure to just so many brands out there, and there was just so much demand for just anything and everything, really. Right? I mean, people were stuck at home, and supply was short. So, in my case, it was just people were just ordering things like rice. The very basic essentials. Couldn't keep up with that.
yeah. I remember
So
telling the story
it was something.
I remember telling the story of one of the companies that I was doing some consulting for. They were selling magnetic eyelashes. And I think during the first month of lockdown, they did something like $4.5 million worth of sales of magnetic eyelashes. And I just couldn't get my head around why so many people were buying it. And it was because they were going online and doing TikToks and things like that. And they wanted to have something that made them look amazing, right? So they were doing like tons of makeup, magnetic eyelashes with this kind of big flamingo or, the ostrich
Right.
eyelashes that kind of flap up and down. And, and for me, I just thought, yeah, okay. I mean, I think sometimes you don't realize something until you've thought it through in a little bit more detail after the event, right? But at the time, it was like crazy, just crazy the amount of money that was being sort of spent on just, like I said, needless products.
Yeah, and the number of FBA businesses finally made their exit. They peaked out, got some buyers, made a killing, just absolutely made a killing on it. So
So
it
you
was
so you got into digital marketing quite by accident. You had the side hustle, which really became your main thing. If you were going to go back to kind of, at the point in time when maybe you were at sort of school, college, university, or whatever, and you were going to go, right, I'm going to break into digital marketing. What would you tell your younger self to say? This is kind of the reason why you should pursue this as a career.
Well, it's interesting you brought it up. So while I was in college, I actually had a little thing where I was selling cameras, digital cameras on eBay, and I didn't really take that seriously enough. I was more focused on finishing my studies, moving on to a professional career. We're talking about the late '90s there. The internet really didn't take off until later, but uh, one of the things I would probably tell my younger self is to, you know, get an understanding of what SEO is, get an understanding of what PPC is, because that could just do wonders. I mean, I remember, this is years after I graduated, but I remember when, Google PPC was all the rage back in 2008. It was just so cheap and so easy to take a budget from just a few dollars a day to, scale it out into millions a year. It was just very doable. But yeah, I would tell myself, look, if I could redo it over, and if I were going to go the digital marketing route, I would probably do some SEO, some lead gen, and sell leads to local businesses. I'd probably do it that way.
Yeah, it's
All
funny.
right. I mean, back then, yeah, in the early 2000s, late 90s, there was a real need for sales, and not too much infrastructure to cover that.
Yeah, and I think it still exists. I think there is still a massive demand for service-based businesses. Things like lawyers, pest control. Again, you look at California; they must be like inundated with fire damage and all that sort of stuff. That like so many different service-based businesses that will be benefiting as a result of people's misfortune. And I as much as I hate the fact that it's happening, it's kind of like these people need solutions for some of the challenges and problems that they have, right? So it's important that there are people there to provide those sorts of services. And as you say,
Yeah.
like if you're a nimble-minded, performance-based marketer, you can kind of really do pretty well on the back of that if you understand some of the technology that sort of sits behind it.
Yeah, especially if you could provide a service to a local based business, get them up and running, because there seems to be a big gap between the businesses that have a huge online presence and the businesses that could compete just as well, but they haven't really made the effort to get online. They haven't really made an effort to boost their profile, so they're losing out market share to those who can. So uh, local is definitely it's a lot easier to target also. So uh, I mean, lead gen on the local level seems to be a lot easier to manage, right? So the more local in nature, the better, and you get an easier understanding of the market there.
Yeah, and there are plenty of networks out there that can provide that support to enable you to kind of buy leads. So again, like let's say you need 3 leads a day or something like that, you can kind of go and find those leads pretty easily. So you don't need to necessarily go into the weeds of trying to go right. I need to create a website, I need to do this, I need to do that. You can kind of just literally go and say, I want to buy 3 leads a day. I'm prepared to pay a certain amount of money for each lead that I get. And again, working on the
Yeah.
basis that those leads can translate into, a call out fee or something like that. It's very easy for you to cover your overheads, by doing that without, again, not having to kind of worry too much about it. And you don't have to commit. It's not something you have to say, again, the thing that's always worried me with some e-commerce businesses is in a lot of cases, they have to spend a huge amount of money on product, right? So they have to kind of go through the manufacturing side of things and incur a great deal of expense. And there's no guarantee that what they produce, they're going to be able to sell, right? So, they could be sort of sitting with products that they just can't get rid of. And that's clearly money that they don't have, right? They don't have the money anymore. They got products that they can't sell for what they're hoping to sell it for. So, whereas obviously
Yeah,
with lead generation, they can kind of, like I said, they can buy as few or as many leads as they need. So if they decide to take 2 weeks off, they can go, you know what, I don't need any leads at the moment. Stop buying, and it's done. You kind of like worry about that.
yeah, and it's interesting you brought that up because that's actually one of the concerns with GDS. So when I was thinking of launching products, well, there's a lot to take into account. You could hop on these trends. I mean, there are plenty of services that you could look toward to find what's trending. But by the time you actually produce it, by the time you figure out all the quirks, that trend might be over,
Yeah,
right? So, and you do run the risk of being stuck with the inventory. So I instead chose the route of partnering with established brands that have established infrastructure, piggybacking off their brand, try to just get them coverage in the U.S. So. It's definitely a consideration. So it depends on your resources. If you have your manufacturing intact, if you're good at product development, if you have all your ducks lined up in a row, probably take that risk. But to go in cold into e-commerce and take on the inventory risk, I don't know, it could backfire. It could backfire quickly. There does seem to be a need, particularly in California, because it's a very competitive space when it comes to that. So lead gen could definitely work out. And these days, it doesn't even cost that much. I mean, to get a landing page going and to get a lead generation workflow happening, you could sign up with Go High Level, create a landing page, and create a whole automated workflow to get that kind of lead gen. And there are plenty of providers that could do that. That could get people set up with that. So,
and
yeah,
usually it's a
it's
pay up results, right? You can typically you pay once you get the results, right? So if you don't get the leads, you don't have to pay for them because you're obviously only paying for the success rather than you have to commit a ton of money up front. So
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, if you think about it, well, I don't want to go into the fires and everything. I mean, that's kind of an outlier. But suppose suppose you do pools. You're in the pool business and you're a pool builder. Well, we're talking about $100,000 and up as a ticket. For you to buy a lead, your cost of acquisition is just nothing compared to the price tag of this type of project. I mean, what could you possibly be paying for the cost of acquisition? Maybe a few $1,000s compared to $100,000 project. So it could be successful for many contractors. Definitely. That definitely seems to be the trend, and you would get the leads through typically Google PPC, Meta, the typical channels. If you're in auto insurance, I've seen TikTok. TikTok is doing pretty well for auto insurance providers, especially those in kind of the subprime markets. So that seems to be working pretty well.
yeah, and again, I think a lot of places like are doing native advertising now. So there are ads that appear on sort of websites. They might be advertorials, but they're ads that appear and they just blend into the publisher's website. So the publisher, a lot of people will buy ads on MSN, and they can make the ads look native to the MSN platform. So it looks like it's a editorial piece that maybe MSN have done when really it's an advert that's been bought by an advertiser promoting a particular thing. And again, I mean, in the lead gen space, I'm always amazed. Like there's a lot of people that are doing tattoo removal and cosmetic surgery and dental work and implants and all sorts of different things that if you look at it, you could sit down and model it all out, and there are so many opportunities for people to kind of get involved. Some of them will be more heavily regulated, so you need some to kind of get some licenses and things like that. So if you're going to do real estate or Medicare or something like that, you need to make sure you don't fall foul of compliance and end up on the wrong side of the FCC coming after you. So that those sorts of things are quite important to make sure you don't kind of fall foul of the regulators, because
Well, yeah, you have to balance the hook with the right disclaimers. That's true, but as far as native is concerned, it's really I see it as no different as other channels. So you're always camouflaging yourself in. So if you're on Facebook, you have to take on a certain tone in how you're advertising. If you're on TikTok, it also has to have a certain mood, a certain tone to it. So it's all really just camouflaging. The difference is, well, you might be camouflaging yourself as a VSL native, right, or an advertorial. So,
and
but
what do
you,
you
you also have to be very careful.
what are your thoughts on TikTok? Do you think it's going to kind of like stay the distance, or do you think it's something's going to happen? I know it's got a stay of execution, but it's just a temporary one rather than the permanent one.
I mean, I don't think it's going to go dark. I don't think so. And it's interesting you mentioned that. So I was approached, I guess, about a year or so ago regarding investing in ByteDance, and I had one question. I had one question for that broker. What happens when they have to sell off TikTok? And yeah, they had no answer for me. I mean, there's no plan B. So ByteDance might take a loss. I think TikTok is here to stay. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen, how it's going to evolve. I mean, if it falls into the hands of Elon Musk, what is he going to do with that? It just remains to be said. But I'll tell you this: I was at a recent conference in Budapest for a TikTok workshop. You would be amazed at their technology, the technology that they're rolling out. Uh, from what I could tell, they could basically replace UGC with very advanced avatars, and it's to the point where you could not even tell the difference. I mean, it would be wise for them to have some kind of disclaimers to the audience to say, "Hey, this is an AI generated ad," because I mean, they could just take your product, take all your collateral, apply an avatar that you won't even know the difference between whether it's a real human or not, and it'll just make an unbelievable script and a whole ad for you. So that's something that that they invited participants in and experimenting, and uh, eventually we'll be rolling out to the masses. So I think TikTok is here to stay. I can't imagine a world where it's just going to go dark. The question is who's going to own it.
Yeah.
So
And obviously, there's always going to be, like, so people that don't want them around because they see them as competition are always going to fuel the fire and say, well, I think they need to go. I think they need to be shut down. If you look at like Google were originally kind of just Google, and they became too monopolistic, too big, too powerful, right? So they set up Alphabet. That then give them a bit of distance between, well, Google's actually this and Alphabet's something completely different. It's not. They're sort of, they did their own sort of breakup of their internal business units, right? So they had this sort of the AdSense bit sort of broken up from the Google Ads bit, from the the Android bit and everything else, and it all works as the same company, but it all sort of does it under the umbrella. And Meta's done the same thing with Facebook and Instagram and everything. They got everything under the umbrella, right? So they can't really be accused of being monopolistic because, well, it's all sort of separate companies underneath the umbrella. So, and I can almost
right,
imagine it might end up in.
yeah, and we have to keep in mind. Well, what is the point of having this check against the monopoly? Well, it's for a consumer benefit, right? So the question becomes, how does the consumer suffer if Meta is a monopoly or if TikTok is a monopoly? And TikTok, I mean, it's still pretty small in e-commerce revenues in the grand scheme of things. I mean, they're
For sure.
just catching up to Walmart.com right now. But the question to ask is, well, what happens to the consumer? And that's something the government is traditionally looking out for. So if Meta's running the ad world and then they're price gouging on the PPC, well, now we have an issue. Now we have a serious issue. So as long as they can keep their prices low and demonstrate that they're not anti-competitive, that they could probably stay under the radar and away from the scrutiny of regulators.
I thought it was quite interesting.
So
In that period, the very short period of time that TikTok was dark, as in it sort of was shut down. What was quite ironic was that the TikTok pixel that most advertisers that needed to kind of like run ads on TikTok put in place was still live on every single site that existed. So all of the data was still being captured by ByteDance, even though they had no kind of like authority to kind of do it because the app wasn't working. So
yeah, they were still hanging on to that hope of going back live, but they also went out on a limb. Their assurances, I mean, it could end up pretty illusory too. But I trust that they're going to work something out with the White House and just stay in existence.
yeah.
So
Yeah, because again, I don't know the full ins and outs of what actually went down to kind of cause it to be banned in the first place, right? But we've had the same thing here in the UK where there are certain pieces of technology that they say got too big for their own boots, and they wanted to try and sort of put in place some regulations, and that's one of the beauties of the kind of the cross-border functionality of most of these apps. It's just that's the way things work. You can't really impose your rules and regulations on us if we don't think the same thing, right? I mean, that's part of the reason why UK decided to come out of the European Union. We wanted to be able to kind of do our own deals rather than having to be part of this kind of group deal, right? So, we wanted to be able to say, if we decide that we're going to sell a banana that's sort of not bent in a certain way because the European Union, it doesn't meet the European requirements, we're going to sell it, right? So, and we should be sort of able to control our own destiny in that respect. So.
all right, it's a valid point. I just hate having to go through passport controls twice. To go through London, then through into the EU. But it's a valid point. Countries should have their autonomy, and I guess the UK kind of felt that they were just too restricted by the bureaucracy of the EU.
Yeah,
Right.
and
So
the same challenges and issues. We had issues with border control. We didn't really feel we had control over our border. We felt that there was always this kind of everything could be escalated up to what they call the European Court of Human Rights. So we have our own laws here, but everything kind of got bumped up there, and it's a bit like everything getting bumped up to the Supreme Court. It's sort of as much as they might say it's kind of impartial, it's not really impartial at all, right? It's there because the people were put in place by certain people in the past, and you know, and yeah, I mean, it's always going to have that sort of the override to be able to say, well, okay, fine, all everything's done at state level, bump it up to the Supreme Court, and then all of a sudden it becomes a federal issue. So
Uh, yeah, it seems that well, with the EU, I mean, it just seems that the people themselves haven't really voted for the powers that ultimately control, right, the EU, and that might be a little bit unfair,
and again, the
right?
beauty of the digital marketers, we know a lot of people in a lot of countries. I know lots and lots of friends in other parts of the European Union who are just as pissed off with the European Union as the UK was, right? But
Yeah,
I
I'm associated with digital marketers that are shopping countries around. That they don't think they're being treated fairly,
yeah,
from a tax perspective. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, they're moving out to Dubai, or they're taking up residency in South America. They're just, they just don't agree with the policies of the EU as it applies to them.
yeah.
So
And the beauty of digital marketing is you can do it anywhere as long as you've got a laptop or computer and the internet. You can do your job more often than not in most places. I mean, yours is slightly
yeah,
different because you have a sort of physical infrastructure that you need to kind of manage. But again, you probably have a team of people that could kind of manage certain aspects of that, and you kind of manage it from wherever you happen to be at the time.
yeah, I have over 60 people in my organization, but in retrospect, I mean, I would have loved to be a digital nomad. I mean, it's pretty exciting to be that liberated, but also what I've also noticed, when you're dealing with digital nomads, there's a certain level. I would say I feel like there's a certain level of trust, right? Because you're dealing on an international scale, and you get into agreements with them. They seem to hold up their end of the bargain a lot more than if you were to go with someone that's established within the U.S. or established within the country. The ones that travel around seem to kind of safeguard their reputation very well. So they tend to just from experience they tend to follow through on their deliverables a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. So, Alan, I'm sure we could sit and sort of jam for an awful long time, but I'm very conscious that you've just got back from a show. You probably got like a whole bunch of stuff to kind of catch up with. So, I wanted to thank you so much for being a guest on Digital Marketing Stories. It's been fantastic to meet you, first of all, and hear a little bit about what's going on with GDS and just some of your thoughts on things. All of the people's all of your contact details will be available in the show notes. Was there anything that you wanted to kind of leave my kind of my audience with in terms of ways in which you can help them in that respect?
Well, the one thing I would tell the audience is when evaluating a digital marketing firm, first evaluate what your resources are. All right, go with a digital marketing firm uh, to the extent that you really feel you need one, that you can't do it in house. Many actually do need digital marketing firms because they're not set up that way. They're set up to produce their product or produce their service, but once you already have your in-house people that could do the work for you, and you need more, then attach a digital marketing firm. All right, so I mean that's my honest, semi-solicited advice, and it's just the most prudent thing to do. You don't just go blindly leaping in with the digital marketing firm. See for yourself if you're capable of doing some of the tasks in house. If you can build some infrastructure behind you first, and then bring in the experts. All right, and just evaluate them. Just see what they're all about. They all vary.
Absolutely. So thanks again so much for being on the show, and look forward to talking to you again at some point in time. And if we ever get to the point
All
where
right.
we happen to be in the same place at the same time, I'd love to have a drink with you at some point.
Well, I'll be in Dubai in February. I don't know where you're going to be. I'm going to be at Affiliate World in Dubai.
All right. Okay.
So, yeah, yeah.
It's
So,
it's one of
I'll
those
love
things
to meet you
like
there.
I used to have a family member that lived in Abu Dhabi, and like we used to kind of go over. And funny enough, I was in Abu Dhabi at the same time that Affiliate World was on, and I mean it's only about 45 minutes up the road, so I couldn't kind of make the dates work for me last year. I'm trying to sort of see if I can make them work this year, but again, I got a lot of friends that go to the show, and they have a great
Oh
time.
yeah,
It's a great time.
and you could find some real high quality digital marketers, and they tend to be the education you get from there. I'd probably say that it kind of puts you ahead of the curve, all right? It kind of puts you ahead of the curve, and they're committed to it. They're not just people learning from YouTube channels. They're not sitting at home in their underwear watching YouTube channels and say, okay, yeah, I can pick up SEO, no problem. They're flying there. They're making this commitment.
Yeah,
They're networking. They're actually learning the material.
and a lot of them are making
So
really good money as well, for sure.
wild amounts of money. Absolutely wild. I mean, just crazy money that they're making. But more importantly, I mean, they're picking up, the skills that they need to really succeed in digital marketing. They're making that kind of solid commitment. There's some marketers I spoke to. I mean, not in the affiliate world, but just on various calls. When I connected with them, some of them don't know what a hook is. Some of them don't know what a VSL is. Then I asked them, well, what commitment do you make to your digital marketing agency? Oh, I watch a few YouTube videos. I watch this influencer or that influencer.
Yeah.
That's not a serious commitment. Would you go to a doctor? Would you go to a surgeon? And if you heard that, if you heard a surgeon say, "Yeah, I don't go to any of those conferences. I just pick up whatever I can on YouTube."
The one that
No,
one always kills
you'd
me.
never do that.
My best friend's son has like read a book on SEO from like 12 years ago, and they can do the SEO for us, and you're like, it just doesn't work that way. It really doesn't.
Jim, I mean, I went to the Bruce Clay, I went to those Bruce Clay classes. I mean, they were great. But after that, I started an internship. I mean, I created an internship. I flew in people from throughout the country. I put them up in apartments. I leased them cars. We created content, and that was the pilot of my SEO project. That's how committed I was to that. And then I ran the SEO team. So I'm just not buying it. I just don't buy those people that say, "Oh yeah, I picked it up from a book and now I know everything." No, you have to make a commitment. You have to invest in yourself, and you have to demonstrate that.
Yeah, I have
So
so many industry friends who have written books about SEO, and they're on version 4, version 5, version 6, because literally the minute they write the end in the book, probably 40-50% of what's in the book is out of date. It's outdated, not
yeah,
accurate, incorrect, right? In some respects, it's much better to have like a website or something like that that can kind of be constantly updated, because a book just, as much as a book might be great if you're looking to get onto the speaker circuit, speaking gigs will come on the back of being an author. But at the same time, it's difficult if the information is not factually correct. It does present some challenges for people that may pick up the book and take it as gospel and sort of try and implement it,
what you have to get from that book is you're always chasing a moving target, and you always have to practice that skill set
for sure.
because it's ever evolving. Yep.
Great.
So,
Alan, thank you again
right.
for being on the show. And I will talk to everyone on the next episode of Digital Marketing Stories.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Great.
Take
Thanks.
care.
That's really good. I really appreciate you being on, taking the time out. And yeah, like I said, I'll leave you to kind of get on with the rest of your day. And hope you have good
All
weather.
right.
It's bloody cold here, I'll tell you that.
Same here.
All
Enjoy your evening. Take
right.
care.
Cheers, Alan.
Bye.
Bye.